I can't quite believe that I'm in Ireland. I presented my research into the stages of parenthood in the States a few months ago. But Dublin kind of holds a special place in my heart because my great-great-grandfather is from Dublin and the house that he lived in is actually still here. So my mother and I are going to try and visit it tomorrow and get a photo taken in front of her great-great-grandfather and my extra generation. So very exciting for me. So my journey to this platform today begins 19 and a half years ago when I became a mother for the first time, and I thought that I was really, really well prepared for parenthood. I did prenatal yoga, I read all the books that I could get my hands on, my husband and I paid to do private antenatal classes, I had a fabulous team of midwives, and my preparation absolutely paid off. The birth was wonderful. We had a midwife who choreographed a wonderful birth for us. She showed my husband how to stand behind me and put his hands on my hips, and we did birth circles when I was in early labour, and it felt like we were dancing. It was just beautiful. And then when I was in the second stage of labour and the pain got quite intense, she taught him how to do acupressure on my back, and I was incredibly grateful for the relief that he gave me. And then we actually talked about birth positions, and we decided that I was going to give birth upright but leaning back, and my husband was standing behind me, and I literally leant back in his arms and he had my back, and so we had a wonderful birth experience and we were all set up to be a happy family. And then we had our first fight in the parking lot at the hospital as new parents. I still can't believe that he was such an idiot. I can say that because I'm on the other side of the world. You know, the baby capsule's got 3 parts, okay? So only 3 parts, it's not complicated. 1, 2, 3. Well, he'd managed to leave one of those parts at home, hadn't he? So we had to strap this brand new, precious, fragile baby into this car seat that only had 2 parts, minus the strap. And, so he's saying like, oh, well, Marie, his sister, didn't tell me, the instructions how to install the thing. And I'm thinking, I just pushed a baby out and you can't call your sister? Are you kidding me? Anyway, so that was our first fight. And then our second fight was driving home. I thought he was driving too fast. He thought I didn't trust him. And that sort of set the tone for the first couple of weeks of parenthood. Okay. A couple of months later, we were sitting in front of our first fire for the year. Yes, it does get cold enough for us to have an open fire even in Sydney. And my husband was building the fire. And I was holding Zach, our son, in my arms. And I don't think the bonding came straight away. It kind of grew over time. But in that moment, I was holding him and I was just, delighting in his sleepy baby size and counting his toes and just feeling the weight of him in my arms, and I just had this feeling that just sort of swelled through my breast, and it was amazing, this sort of incredible love. And then I looked over at my husband, who was kind of silhouetted in the firelight, and sadly, in that moment on that day, I thought, my gosh, I have never felt this sort of love for you, and my feelings for him really paled in comparison. I'm missing him now, so and I felt quite sad. I didn't know how to grow myself to love both my son, my child, and my husband at the same time. I didn't tell him that. And then there's lots more that I didn't tell him over the next couple of weeks. My new mother self was unfolding, and I felt like I was growing into somebody who hadn't really met yet. I felt expanded. Motherhood made me feel stronger and more complete in some ways, and yet much more fragile and vulnerable in others. And I couldn't communicate those things to my husband. I couldn't put the words to it. I couldn't articulate to him what was going on inside me. And so consumed was I in my new mother responsibilities and so overwhelmed with new motherhood, I didn't even think what, if anything, was going on inside of my husband, and so I didn't ask him questions about his experience of fatherhood, and that started to become a distance between us. So for the next few years, we found ourselves grappling with issues that we were completely blindsided by. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. My self-esteem plummeted. We were fighting a lot. We were confronted by issues that none of the books had covered, none of the classes had prepared for us for. And, I was wondering how my idea of happily ever after felt like it was moving towards the end. It felt like at the same time we were trying to build a co-parenting relationship on shifting sands. You know, we just didn't have a framework to make sense of what we were experiencing. And then I began my career as a relationship counsellor. I've been working as a relationship counsellor for 15 years now. And one of the first questions we ask a couple in the first session is, when did things start to change between you? And inevitably they would say it was after the birth of a first child. So I got really curious about that. And it seemed that it wasn't just happening to me, and it wasn't just happening to my friends that I'd discussed things with in confidence, but that it seemed to be happening to all of us. And I thought, this is crazy. There can't be something wrong with all of us. You know, what's going on? And so I started researching it. And I was absolutely gobsmacked to find that there was decades of research dating right back to the 1950s to show that having a first child was really challenging for a couple. Even Dr. Spock refers to it in his book. And there were some key studies done in the United States in the 70s and 80s showing that having a baby clearly mixed things up. And yet this research hadn't translated from the therapeutic community, from the psychologists and the relationship counsellors, through to the birth community. Nobody told them, so they couldn't prepare us. I was certainly shocked by the statistics that I found. 92% of couples report increased conflict in the first year after childbirth. 67% report a decline in relationship satisfaction in the first 3. 17% of Australian parents go as far as saying that having a baby actually caused the end of their relationship. And in the United States, 30% of dads will leave their family in the first couple of years. I didn't want to know these things. I certainly didn't want to be the person to bring them to other people's attention. It's not much fun to talk about. But it made me very curious to know more. I didn't just want to know what was happening, but I wanted to know why. And even more importantly, I wanted to know what I could do about it. I was looking for answers, but I found a lot more than that. I found that the statistics actually obscured the truth. I discovered that there's a huge gap between pregnancy and parenting. There's a lot of fabulous resources for pregnancy and for birth, and there's a lot of fabulous resources for parenting, as evidenced very nicely today. But there's a massive, massive gap in between those two states, and it's called parenthood. What's the difference? Pregnancy and parenting is about our relationship with our baby or our growing child. Parenthood is about our relationship with ourselves as we become mothers or as we become fathers, our relationship between us and our partners as we make that transition, our relationship with our own parents. My relationships with my parents both changed when I became a mother, and I was not expecting that. Our relationship with our friends. I lost my colleagues. I got to know my neighbours who I'd never known before that time, and also our relationship with our community. All these changes occur in the transition into parenthood, and yet we don't give parents preparation or support through all of these changes. And it's my experience that it's those changes that impact on the couple's relationship, and that those impacts on the couple's relationship affects mothers and fathers' mental health and their marriages. And you might be surprised to know that whereas 1 in 7 mothers are depressed, so are 1 in 10 fathers. So I think we need to do something about that. Another child, and nearly 20 years later, our family is now thriving. I'm very happy to report. And as much as I love our 3 kids, I'm also looking forward to spending time, just my husband and I, in front of the fire, and travelling and enjoying each other's company. We have a date every afternoon. We take our dogs for a walk past the beach. We have a coffee date while we're out, and we're thriving. Because I discovered 2 things over the last 15 years working with clients. The first thing is that when we grow as a couple, we also grow as a family. When we know how to grow through the stages of parenthood, couples can become bonded like never before. We grow through the challenges when we know how to approach them. And we bed down foundations for our family at the same time. And that's the second thing. That preparation for becoming parents is also preparation for growing the roots for a family. Okay? When I know how to adjust my expectations of my husband, I know how to adjust my expectations when my kids come along. When I know what my needs are, when I can identify and articulate my needs and help my husband identify and articulate his needs, I can do that for my children. If I know how to nurture my own self-esteem and my husband's self-esteem, it comes naturally when it's time to do that for my kids. Relationship skills are family skills. And we can harness those relationships, we can grow that family so much easier. I was reluctant to do this work, but now I can see it's absolutely perfect for me. I see my role now is teaching birth, health and therapy professionals to support the couple bond with the families in their care. To tell them that yes, your babies are absolutely gorgeous, but don't forget each other. And to facilitate that. Because looking back, I realised it's not any one person's responsibility in our society, in our culture today, to prepare parents for parenthood. It's not a doulas, a midwives, an OBGYNs, a doctors, a paediatricians, or even a friend or a family's responsibility. Nobody carries that role today. Everybody used to do it in the past. And yet, there's a small town in southern Italy where the church bells ring at 10 o'clock every morning for 2 weeks as a signal that a new baby has been born into a village, and it's everybody's responsibility to look after that new family. I don't think it's any one person's responsibility. I think it's everybody's responsibility. And so, thinking about that, there's 2 things I'll ask you to do. One is if you're in Ireland, 2014 is the United Nations International Year of the Family. And there's a global prenatal initiative that's happening all around the world this year. Ireland is trying to get together an association for prenatal educators. If anybody's interested or know anyone who might be interested, contact me afterwards and I'll put you in touch with the right people to do that. The second thing is, if you know someone in your own community who's expecting, reach out to them, because new parents need support and they need to know that it's okay to ask for it. So please reach out to them, especially if you know how to fit baby car seats.